Have you ever caught yourself pulling your collar up just to hide those tiny little bumps on your skin, the kind that seem so small, yet somehow make you feel uncomfortable every time someone stands a little too close or looks a little too long at your neck, your underarms, or your skin? You tell yourself it is nothing serious, just a small imperfection, but deep down it bothers you more than you would like to admit. I have seen this feeling countless times. My name is Dr. Javier Morales, and after more than 20 years working closely with patients, I can tell you this with complete honesty. Most people are not really struggling with the skin itself. They are struggling with confusion, frustration, and the fear of doing the wrong thing. Because when these small growths appear, people react quickly. They search online, they try random methods, they follow advice from strangers. And without realizing it, they often make the situation worse. What seems like a simple skin issue can quickly turn into irritation, infection, or even permanent marks. All because of one critical mistake. They never truly understood what they were dealing with in the first place, and that is exactly what we are going to change today. In this video, I am not going to give you risky home tricks or false promises. Instead, I will walk you through a clear, safe, and practical way to understand what is happening on your skin, why it appears, and what you should actually do about it. Because once you understand your skin, you stop guessing. And when you stop guessing, you stop making mistakes. And that is where real confidence begins. Before doing anything to your skin, there is one step that most people completely ignore, and that is simply taking a moment to understand what they are actually dealing with. In my experience, this is where nearly all mistakes begin. People notice a small growth on their neck, under their arms, or somewhere on their body, and without thinking too much about it, they immediately assume it is a wart or some kind of harmless skin issue that just needs to be removed. That assumption alone is often what leads them down the wrong path. Over the years, I have seen many patients who came to me frustrated after trying different methods at home. They had followed advice they found online, used remedies recommended by others, and in some cases even attempted to remove the growth themselves, and yet nothing worked. Not because the treatments were always ineffective, but because they were treating the wrong condition from the very beginning. What many people do not realize is that not all skin growths are the same, even if they look similar at first glance. Some are linked to external factors such as viral infections, while others are simply small changes in the skin that develop over time due to friction or internal conditions in the body. When these two are confused, the results are almost always disappointing. I remember a patient who was convinced he had stubborn warts on his neck. He had spent weeks trying to remove them, becoming more frustrated each time nothing changed. But when I examined his skin closely, it became clear that what he had was something entirely different, something that behaves in a completely different way and requires a different approach altogether. Once we corrected that misunderstanding, everything else became much simpler. This is why paying attention to small details matters more than most people think. The way a growth feels, the area where it appears, and how it behaves over time can already tell you a great deal. And when you take the time to observe, instead of reacting immediately, you give yourself the chance to make the right decision from the start. Because in the end, the goal is not just to remove something from your skin, but to do it safely and correctly. One of the most common patterns I see in patients is how quickly they react the moment they notice something unusual on their skin. There is an almost immediate urge to do something about it, to remove it, to fix it as soon as possible. On the surface, this reaction seems logical. Nobody wants to keep something uncomfortable or unattractive on their body. But in reality, this sense of urgency often leads to the very mistakes that make the situation worse. When you act too quickly, you skip the most important step, which is understanding what you are dealing with. Instead of observing, you move straight into action, and that action is usually based on assumptions, not knowledge. This is why so many people end up repeating the same cycle, trying one method after another without ever seeing real results. The issue is not always the treatment itself, but the fact that it was never the right solution for that specific condition. Another mistake that has become increasingly common is self-diagnosing through the internet. Today, it only takes a few seconds to search for symptoms and compare images. People scroll through pictures, find something that looks similar, and convince themselves that they have found the answer. But the problem is that many skin conditions can appear almost identical to an untrained eye. What looks like a simple wart in a photo could be something entirely different in reality. And once that incorrect assumption is made, every decision that follows is built on that same misunderstanding. I have seen patients who were absolutely certain about their diagnosis because they had done their research only to discover that they had been treating the wrong condition for weeks or even months. By the time they seek professional help, the skin is often irritated, inflamed, or even damaged from repeated attempts. Then there is a more aggressive approach that some people take when frustration starts to build. Instead of waiting or seeking proper guidance, they decide to remove the growth themselves using whatever tools they have at home. It might be a small pair of scissors, a nail clipper, or even a blade. In their mind, it seems like a quick and effective solution. But what they often do not consider is the risk involved. The skin is not just something you can cut without consequences. Even a small mistake can lead to significant bleeding, especially if the growth contains blood vessels. And without proper sterile conditions, the risk of infection becomes very real. What started as a minor cosmetic concern can quickly turn into something far more serious, requiring medical treatment that could have been avoided entirely. As frustration continues to build, many people begin to trust methods that sound simple and convenient, especially those shared by friends, family members, or popular online sources. These so-called natural or home remedies often promise quick results with minimal effort. At first they seem harmless. After all, they use everyday ingredients or techniques that feel familiar. But what most people do not realize is that just because something is common does not mean it is safe. I have seen individuals try to tie off small growths with thread, believing that cutting off the blood supply will make them fall off naturally. Others apply substances like vinegar or acidic solutions directly onto the skin, hoping to burn the growth away. While these methods may occasionally produce some visible change, they come with significant risks. The skin surrounding the area is often affected as well, leading to irritation, chemical burns, or long-term marks that are far more noticeable than the original problem. The issue here is not only the method itself, but the lack of control. At home, there is no sterile environment, no precise way to measure how much damage is being done, and no professional evaluation of what is actually being treated. What people believe is a harmless shortcut can easily turn into a situation that requires medical attention. There is another mistake that is even more subtle and in many ways more concerning, because it often goes completely unnoticed. Many people treat these skin changes as purely cosmetic, something that only affects appearance and nothing more. They focus entirely on removing what they see on the surface without ever asking why it appeared in the first place, but the skin is not separate from the rest of the body. In many cases, it reflects what is happening internally. Certain types of growths are closely linked to underlying conditions such as metabolic imbalances or changes in how the body processes sugar. When these signals are ignored, the problem is not truly solved. Even if one growth disappears, others may continue to appear over time. This is why simply removing something from the skin is not always the answer. Without understanding the cause, the cycle often repeats itself. So at this point, the question becomes very clear. If reacting quickly leads to mistakes and common shortcuts come with risks, then what is the right way to approach this? What actually works? And more importantly, what is safe? That is exactly what we are going to explore next. Now that we have seen where most people go wrong, it becomes much easier to understand what a safer and more effective approach should look like. And the first thing I always tell my patients is surprisingly simple. Do not rush. The moment you slow down and give yourself time to observe, you are already avoiding many of the mistakes we just talked about. Instead of reacting immediately, take a closer look at what is on your skin. Pay attention to how it feels when you touch it, how it looks under good lighting, and where it appears on your body. These small observations may seem insignificant, but they often provide the first clues about what you are dealing with. When you pause and observe instead of acting out of urgency, you shift from guessing to understanding, and that changes everything. Once you take that step, the next part becomes much clearer. You begin to recognize patterns. Some growths feel firm and remain fixed in place, while others are softer and move slightly when touched. Some appear in areas that experience constant friction, while others show up in places more exposed to external contact. These differences are not random. They are part of how your skin communicates what is happening. And this is where many people finally realize why their previous attempts did not work. It was not a lack of effort, it was a lack of accurate identification. When you treat something without truly knowing what it is, even the best method can fail. But when you correctly understand the nature of the growth, your choices become much more precise. From there, the approach becomes more intentional. Instead of applying the same solution to everything, you begin to choose methods that actually match the condition. Some situations require patience and gradual treatment, while others are better handled with professional care rather than home experimentation. The key is not to find the fastest solution, but the most appropriate one. I often remind patients that effectiveness is not about doing more, but about doing the right thing. When the method aligns with the condition, progress becomes much more predictable. And just as importantly, the risk of damaging your skin is significantly reduced. This is the point where everything starts to shift. What once felt confusing and frustrating becomes more structured and manageable, and instead of trying random solutions, you begin to act with clarity and confidence. Up to this point, we have focused on what you can see and feel on the surface, but there is another layer that many people overlook, and in some cases it is even more important than what appears on the skin itself. Because not all skin changes begin on the outside. Some of them are reflections of what is happening inside your body. This is something I always try to explain to my patients, especially those who notice multiple growths appearing over time. When these changes are not isolated, when they keep coming back or increasing in number, it is often a sign that the body is responding to something deeper. In many cases, it has to do with how the body processes sugar and how sensitive it is to insulin. You do not need to understand every scientific detail to grasp the idea. What matters is recognizing that your skin can act as a signal. When certain patterns appear repeatedly, it may be your body's way of telling you that something needs attention. This is why focusing only on removing what is visible is often not enough. Even if one growth disappears, others may continue to form if the underlying condition remains unchanged. That is when people feel stuck, as if they are constantly dealing with the same issue over and over again. So instead of asking only how to remove it, a better question is what can be adjusted to prevent it from coming back. Small changes in daily habits can make a significant difference over time. Reducing excessive sugar intake, being more mindful of processed foods, and maintaining regular physical activity all play a role in how your body regulates itself. These are not instant solutions, but they address something much more important, which is the root of the problem. At the same time, it is essential to understand that there are limits to what should be done at home. Not every situation is suitable for self-treatment, and recognizing when to step back is part of making a safe decision. If a growth changes rapidly, begins to bleed, causes pain, or appears in sensitive areas, it is always better to seek professional evaluation rather than take unnecessary risks. I often tell my patients that knowing when not to act is just as important as knowing what to do. That awareness alone can prevent complications that are far more difficult to deal with later. When you combine these elements, careful observation, correct identification, appropriate action, and attention to your overall health, you move away from guesswork and toward a more complete understanding of your body. And that is where real lasting results begin. At the beginning, this may have seemed like a small and simple issue, something that only affects how your skin looks. But as you have seen throughout this video, it is rarely just about appearance. In many cases, it reflects how well you understand your own body and the decisions you make when something changes. From my personal experience, after many years working with patients, I can tell you that the biggest difference does not come from a specific product or a quick trick. It comes from awareness. The people who take a moment to understand what they are dealing with, who avoid rushing into risky solutions, and who respect the limits of what can be done safely at home are the ones who get the best long-term results. At the same time, I want to be very clear about something. This information is meant to guide you, not to replace a proper medical evaluation. Every person is different, and not all skin changes can or should be managed at home. If something looks unusual, changes, quickly causes pain, or simply makes you unsure, the safest decision is always to consult a qualified professional. Because in health, being cautious is never a mistake. What matters most is that you are no longer acting out of confusion. You now have a clearer way to observe, to think, and to decide. And that alone puts you in a much stronger position than before. If this video has helped you understand your skin in a new way, I invite you to subscribe and stay connected. Each week I share practical and easy to understand insights to help you take better care of your health without unnecessary risks. And I would really like to hear your perspective as well. Have you ever experienced something similar? What did you try and what was your result? Your story might help someone else avoid the same mistakes. Thank you for being here. Take care of your skin, take care of your health, and remember, the best decisions are always the ones made with knowledge and responsibility.